Rishi Sunak has welcomed Lord Cameron back to the Cabinet after 7 years, joking that he was pleased to see those for whom it may not be their first time around the number 10 table. The Prime Minister brought in the cameras for his first Cabinet meeting since the dramatic reshuffle yesterday and said he believed they were an energetic and enthusiastic team that is going to deliver for the country. Joining me in the studio now, our chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell. Good to see you, Peter.
Hi.
Times columnist Hugo Rifkind. Hello, Hugo. And down the line, we're joined by chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. Hello, Sonia. Thanks for joining us. Why don't we start with Peter? He says he's going to deliver for the country. What does he mean? A, how much time will he have? And B, what's he thinking of delivering?
Probably not very much time. And the big question in terms of his delivery comes in January, on the 4th of January, when people say you've made these 5 pledges over the last year. Where are we with stopping the boats? About 20% down, Rishi Sunak says. Where are we with the economy? 3 of those 5 on that, the other on NHS waiting lists. So we'll see where we are with that. But in terms of foreign policy, obviously the huge things are Israel, Gaza, there's Ukraine as well, but many other issues as well. David Cameron, well, he was the future once. Will he be the future again? He's back in the cabinet. He's back around the cabinet table, and it is fascinating to see. It hasn't happened since Edward Heath brought back Alec Douglas Hume to be his foreign secretary again from the Lords.
I don't know what kind of oxymoronic view we have, Hugo, if we think that somebody can be the future once and can they be the future again? How many times can you be the future? I don't know what's happening. I don't know whether the future's orange or what's going on with it, but certainly this was a shock. Not a single seasoned Politico could claim they'd seen it coming, not one. People were reeling. Quentin Letts was saying there wasn't even anyone to take a picture because everyone was so not expecting it and nobody was there to record the moment. There was the very long, slow march in by Cameron looking exceedingly comfortable. I thought it was hilarious yesterday afternoon, if I wasn't about to start crying at the prospect, that various of my commentators, including Michael Quick, said, well, you know, David Cameron was at a loose end. His business endeavours hadn't gone at all well. You know, he just wasn't busy doing anything else. He couldn't take up growing prize marrows or anything like that because he could just come and be foreign secretary.
Tough being an XPM. What do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do?
I just don't know what's going on there with the sense of entitlement, with the kind of noblesse oblige, he wasn't really doing anything else, so he could just come back, even though his departure was hardly the most auspicious departure, the most kind of celebratory and triumphal departure we've ever seen, was it?
It's November. The shepherd's heart will have been getting cold.
Yeah.
You know, at least he's in the warmth now. Look, you can look at this sort of, well, a variety of ways. The most positive way to look at it, Foreign Secretary is a really important job, particularly now. There are 2 major wars going on in the world.
Yeah.
Britain has in one sense or another, a stake in both of them. We're involved. We are. You know, people talk us down a lot. We're still one of the major economies, major militaries, major diplomatic players in the world. We need a heavyweight Foreign Secretary. James Cleverly was arguably not really one, although he didn't do a bad job. Moving into another role. Rishi Sunak looking around ministers, looking around cabinet, looking around the party. I think in that perspective, for Britain, this is a good appointment. Whether it makes a big difference to the political fortunes of the Conservative Party is a completely different matter. And what it means for David Cameron is kind of a third matter, I think.
Let's bring Sonia into this. Sonia, what do you think it does for the falling fortunes of the Conservative Party? I mean, is this a masterstroke? You bring back a past heavyweight, everyone's quite forgotten about Brexit and any other blips that he may have engineered, and in fact just looks pleased to see him because he seems comforting and pre-pandemic and rather lovely at heart and we're a bit thrilled, or what the hell is happening?
Well, Vanessa, I don't think it changes very much material in terms of the government's electoral fortunes. I think, you know, following a cabinet reshuffle, particularly when you make quite an eye-catching move like this one, bringing in a former Prime Minister, putting him in the Lords in order to give him one of the top 4 jobs in the cabinet, yes, it's going to be a talking point for the few days afterwards. But I think in terms of how it cuts through to voters, whether it's going to change the way that people might vote, I imagine it's going to have a very marginal impact at all, if at all. I think what Sunak was hoping to achieve is to sort of signal that, you know, his party might become more appealing to the voters who they will be competing with the Liberal Democrats over in many southern seats, what's often called the blue wall, where there's a sort of competition between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. But if I'm honest, I just think, you know, changing the guard at the top, even doing something which sort of is quite eye-catching and catches the headlines, like bringing in a former Prime Minister, voters are more interested, I think, in terms of how they vote, in terms of what's going to be happening to the economy in the next few months, what's happening with the NHS, which is facing another NHS crisis. So I think it is, you can see what he's trying to do, but I think there's a danger in putting too much stock into a cabinet reshuffle, just because people us in Westminster, we like to get quite obsessed with them.
I'd really like to talk about Esther McVey, many things I'd quite like to say and ask, but before I do, I feel I must talk about Suella Braverman, so let's do that first. Peter, lots of people have considered the appointment of Cameron some kind of smokescreen to stop anybody looking at, talking about or thinking about Suella Braverman. However, she has a pretty sort of firm caucus of supporters, doesn't she? What's the story with that, and whether they might rise up and stab Rishi Sunak between the shoulder blades?
I think it's really between 12 and 20 MPs that really properly support Suella Braverman. I think that Dame Andrea Jenkins has come out with a no confidence letter in Rishi Sunak already. It hasn't been a big splash. We're waiting to hear from her, of course, Suella Braverman. She says there's a lot more that she has to say, and we will, of course, hear that. Her reaction to the Rwanda judgment tomorrow from the Supreme Court will be fascinating. But not for the first time, Sonia Soda is absolutely bang on in her analysis there. I don't think there are going to be too many people who say that, oh, David Cameron's the Foreign Secretary, I'm now going to vote for you. But there has been a shift in tone. Now, I think there's a tacit acceptance as well that the red wall is gone for the Conservative Party. They've put Richard Holden, the MP for North West Durham, in as the chairman of the Conservative Party, but I see that pretty much as tokenistic. So the focus now is on those blue wall seats, south and southwest, to see if they can really hold those, keep those. But I think in terms of the red wall and actually the kind of people that Suella Braverman really appealed to, well, I think Rishi Sunak has sort of slightly given up on them in some senses, although Esther McVey may well be the person to bring them back in. We don't know.
Hugo, Suella Braverman says, goodbye, but I've got something to say and I'm pretty soon going to say it. What do you reckon she's going to say?
Oh, God knows, it could be anything. But I mean, look, Rishi Sunak, he does have a problem to the right of his party. You've got to think, he's the guy who saw off Boris Johnson. He saw off Liz Truss. He is responsible for, in government, there is no longer Jacob Rees-Mogg, no longer Nadine Dorries. When he went into government, he had Gavin Williamson, Dominic Raab, Suella Braverman. Priti Patel's no longer there. There's this whole cast of kind of sort of post-Brexit right-wing Tories, some of whom he got rid of on purpose, some of whom he's had to lose when he didn't want to. But he is still quite sort of exposed there. So Suella Braverman could cause trouble with him among these people. Exactly what she'll say, I can't imagine. I shouldn't imagine Rishi Sunak was unwise enough to say anything particularly unwise to her. But you never know.
Sonia Soda, you've been described as spot on just seconds ago, which isn't bad, an endorsement of a magnificent variety. Tell me what you think Suella Braverman will do next. Could she cause a great deal of trouble? Could she be a rabble-rouser? Are they a rabble?
Well, I think she's certainly going to try and cause trouble. And we saw that in her sort of little hint that she was going to be revealing more about her relationship with Sunak, which is what we've just been talking about. But look, I think whether Sunak had sacked Braverman or not, he's facing an incredibly fractious, divided party. And the reason for that is that the Conservatives have been in government for 13 years. There's a real sense that the country wants a change. The Conservatives are 20 points behind Labour in the polls. And in those circumstances, it's very hard to keep a party together because there are lots of Conservative MPs who genuinely think they're going to lose their seat come the next election. And if you feel like that, you don't really feel like being loyal to the PM where you feel like you disagree with them on. So that is the kind of environment that Sunak is working in. I think Braverman will be more problematic now that she's going to be on the backbenches. But to be fair, she was causing a huge amount of trouble for the Prime Minister from within the cabinet anyway. So I think he really did have to sack her. And I doubt that she's going to have enough numbers to pose serious difficulties for the Prime Minister in terms of potentially mounting a leadership challenge this side of an election. But she will certainly, I think, continue to make noises from the backbenches. It will continue to give voters a sense that this is a divided party.
Whatever Rishi Sunak did with Suella Braverman was never going to be universally popular. If he'd kept her where she was, he would have been seen as weak. If he tried to demote her, she would have said no and resigned as a martyr. Or perhaps she would have resigned after tomorrow's decision. Let's say the Supreme Court goes against the government. She may then call for the government for the country to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. So there are a number of things that are in the ether. She's a very popular person with quite a number of people and quite a number of Conservative members. Certainly when I was at Conservative Party conference a month ago, she was the toast of Manchester. And I think she thinks that the Conservatives will lose the next election. All the evidence is there. There will be a leadership contest. The only real question for her is whether, as the MPs vote, she gets to the final two, because the membership, I think, love her.
Okay, let's talk about Esther McVey. Hugo, over to you. There were all sorts of visceral, guttural reactions, some of which I can't recreate for the benefit of our audience right now because they're unsuitable. But this is a woman who most definitely evokes an enormously, instinctual, atavistic response among many. Now, why is that? I used to work with her on GMTV. She's feisty, she's punchy, she's very pretty, she's very eloquent, she's very driven by passion. Why are people so I don't know, whatever the word is, so exercised by her?
Well, for the same reason that Rishi Sunak hasn't given her a proper job, I think. You know, he's given her
Why
sort of
has he given her this
a made-up
Minister
tokenistic
for
job.
Common
I would
Sense
say you're on it's a bit of a hostage to fortune having a common sense Tsar. You know, it's quite easy to fall foul of that job description, I would say, even if you're not Esther McVey.
Right.
But she's a tokenistic figure. She's there to appeal to the people who really, really mind that Suella Braverman's gone. The more sort of hatred and derision she attracts from the left, the better she's doing her job, really. So I think she's there precisely for that reason, for all the reasons that she'd be deemed sort of
Sonia Soda, so he's got Lord Cameron in situ to waft us back in the sweet mists of nostalgia alongside a Dvorak theme tune as we push a bicycle up a cobbled street. And then he's got Esther McVey to I don't know what, to appeal to the right of the party and generally really upset the people who are really pleased to see David Cameron. What the hell's going on? It's very difficult to fathom the plan or the plot here.
Yeah, well, it all comes back to what I was talking about, which is they are an incredibly divided party, and Sunak, to some extent, has got to try and appeal to all wings. And indeed, many people thought that that's why he put Braverman back in the Home Office in the first place, even though she'd been sacked for breaking the ministerial code. She didn't have she didn't exactly have a great record, but she did back Sunak in the leadership contest, and it's generally thought that he put her in the Home Office to sort of help keep that wing of the party satisfied. I think if he'd kicked out Suella Braverman and not made any overtures to the right while bringing back David Cameron, the right of his party might have felt quite upset about that, I suppose. So, he's a weak prime minister, very, very weak. He's got a fractious, divided party. This is what weak prime ministers do. They try and make everyone happy and just hold it together as much as they possibly can.